With Team Canada's camp set to resume on Monday, here's what we know. We have 42 CHL players in camp, 43 if you include former WHL star Kirby Dach. They competed in 2 inter-squad games. Then, on Monday, November 23rd, 2 players tested positive for COVID, forcing everyone into a 14-day quarantine. My name's Scott Van Coonet, and joining me is Sportsnet's junior hockey expert, Sam Cosentino. Sam, the players had a week of camp and have been stuck in their hotel rooms for almost 2 weeks now. How is this going to affect Hockey Canada's evaluation as far as making cuts coming out of this?
Well, they went to camp nice and early and they made provisions for something like this happening. And of course it did. So the idea behind it was that if everything was smooth sailing, they would have had a camp that's longer than any other camp they would have ever had. It really would have allowed them to hunker down on the players, get a sense for the players being comfortable in their environment so that they go out and play their game the way that they normally play in their CHL seasons. But that didn't happen. And so now you kind of have to rely a little bit on past currency, whether you've been in the Hockey Canada program or not, what you've done most recently coming off of the year that you just had in the CHL, truncated as it may be, and then what you did in the short time between practices and those 2 exhibition games, inter-squad games that you talked about. So it does, it sucks for some of the players that don't have that currency built up. For those who are returning players or those who have a good history with Hockey Canada's program, maybe it's a benefit because some of those other players might not get the chance to prove themselves and really come out of nowhere. So the likelihood is that they go with the more certain players that they seem to have a longer track record with.
Right. So you said it right there. Every year we see someone that might not have otherwise made Team Canada use the CIBC Canada Russia series as a springboard to making the roster. Joel Hofer or Jamie Drysdale come to mind. How much does this pause hurt guys like Ridley Gregg or Xavier Simoneau, who showed up late to camp, or Tyson Forrester and Cole Schwint, who were hurt early on in camp?
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, those guys would have been having this perfect opportunity to get comfortable, with the environment, first of all, getting comfortable back on the ice, getting comfortable in game situations. And now all of that is really just blown up in the air. But some of that currency that we talked about is not only built up through Hockey Canada's program of excellence, but as you mentioned, the CIBC Canada Russia series, which wasn't played. And oftentimes, even a Dawson Mercer is a guy that jumps out to me as an immediate guy who had an impact last year for Team Canada. Those opportunities didn't present themselves. So it is really disappointing because aside from that, Hockey Canada then gets a chance to evaluate one of its tight competitors in Russia as well. So that opportunity never presented itself. So, man, oh man, the things that have changed and just how much it's had an impact everywhere in the game is really, really fascinating to me. But that's just another element of it, not being able to play that series where people who can kind of come out of nowhere, where the rosters are expanded because of you're playing in each league, that opportunity never existed. So, all the staff, Alan Miller and Andre Tournier, have really had to rely on video scouting and their network of people that they know throughout each of the leagues to try and come up with the list that they got to get to camp. And now they're going to have to lean on that a little bit more here to pare down the numbers.
So the players are stuck in their hotel rooms, right now. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be stuck in a hotel room for 14 days by yourself. How is Hockey Canada keeping these guys engaged during this time?
Well, they're trying to engage the group in the morning. Players are tasked with coming up with some sort of motivational comment, speech, video, whatever the case might be, to share with the group. So that, works in terms of team bonding. They've been fortunate enough that they've had some local support provide resources to be able to work out, whether it's rollers or yoga mats or bikes that have been placed into the rooms for the players so that they can continue their off ice workout as best as possible, along, of course, with the weight bearing stuff using your own body weight. So they've been able to take care of the physical part that way, the bonding part in one way. And then there's apps and things that are available to them from a mental health standpoint, because we know how challenging that could be. So there's an app out there called Hone. It's a company out of Calgary. The players are tasked with answering a questionnaire every morning. It's monitored by Scott Salmon and by Andre Tournier anonymously. But if they do see a red flag, then they have the opportunity to approach those players and further provide resources to make them feel comfortable. Aside from that, no doubt video games are being played, a lot of time on the phone, no question about it. They've tried to organize some events, but I understand the Wi-Fi isn't great in that hotel. So that's been a little bit challenging for them. But they're just doing the best they can. A lot of TV, probably a lot of calls to home, a lot of FaceTime, a lot of interacting amongst the group. But really, man, I can't imagine. I can't even imagine that. I mean, if I had to think about me going on a trip and then having to come back and quarantine in my own house, in one room of the house, I think that would be extremely challenging, even though it's in the comfort of my own home. I couldn't imagine as a 19-year-old kid having to do it in a strange place.
You've had conversations with a couple of guys that are there. What's the morale like with those guys?
Well, I think at the start of it, is obviously there was a lot of people questioning, what exactly are we here for? Why are we doing this? And then at that point, you don't really have a choice, because if you were to leave the protective environment, then obviously you would risk the spread of COVID-19 to innocent people. So they weren't really left with much of a choice. And I think early on there was a lot of trepidation about how this 2 weeks is going to go. But I think as time has gone on, people start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you start to think about more what's on the other side of it, as opposed to being in the middle of it. And what's on the other side is an opportunity of a lifetime for all of these kids, even those who are returning. So I think that part is so close to happening now that that's more the focal point than just being locked up in a room.
Well, getting back to the on ice product, we know the returning guys and Kirby Dach are locks. That's set. They only had the 2 exhibition games, but who impressed you the most in those games and maybe earned themselves a spot on the roster?
Well, Philip Tomasino, I think, has been absolutely brilliant. Connor Zary is a guy whose name has come up. He's been really, really good, in the game so far and in practices. The goaltending situation still has to sort itself out. But there's a couple guys in the back who I think have kind of climbed up the ranks a little bit. And both Ryan O'Rourke and Donovan Sabrango, O'Rourke, of course, from Sault Ste. Marie, and Sabrango from Kitchener, those guys have played really well and in the undercover kind of way. So I've been impressed with what they've had to bring to the table. You look at Peyton Krebs; he seems to be moving really well out there. Winnipeg Ice, Vegas Golden Knights prospect. So there's been a few guys who have impressed me. No doubt, Dylan Cousins has done some really good things. Thomas Harley has been excellent so far. So there are a lot of positives to take forward with what's been happening so far. But the best player for me on the ice in both games has been Bowen Byram. He looks to me like he's ready to make the jump to the National Hockey League, and that's got to be really exciting for fans who already have a couple of young defensemen to cheer about in Colorado.
Yeah, for sure. And they had, speaking of Bowen Byram, they had the youngest player in camp, Shane Wright, rooming with him. Did Shane show enough in his limited time to become just the 6th 16-year-old to suit up for Canada?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I don't think, part of the reason of he was rooming with Bowen Byram was to kind of loosen him up and get him out of his shell a little bit, which, if you know Shane, he's about as focused an individual as there is, despite his youth. So I think they were still in the process of allowing that to happen. And I think he was just starting to get into his game where we saw him last year with his 39 goals with Kingston. So I don't think he's quite there yet. I hope he gets an opportunity over the couple of days coming out of the quarantine, where he feels comfortable, maybe because of all the bonding that's gone on, which will then translate to the ice, because there's no question he's a special talent. But to this point, he's been average to slightly above average. And to be quite honest with you, he's a guy that I would really love to see just kind of get into his groove there and see what kind of damage he could do in the couple of days he may have left to prove himself.
He's certainly a guy that I feel like could slot anywhere in the lineup. He doesn't have to be a top 6 guy. You could put him in the bottom 6 and still feel safe with him. Well, finally, how does this pause in camp hurt Canada's overall chances at repeating a gold?
I don't think it's going to hurt too much. I think there's still enough runway there that they can get the team, get them together, get whittled down to that number of 25. You have a strong core of returning players with Drysdale and Byram on the back end. You have a good group of forwards up front who played a year ago. Expect bigger things at a Byfield. Mercer's been good in the 2 games so far. The addition of Kirby Dach is going to help. Connor McMichael looks like he's on point with his producing abilities. So there's a lot there to kind of hang your hat on. And to know that you've got that core group to understand what it's like to win a championship is hugely important. And then you have some of the other guys, the Peyton Krebs of the world, the 19-year-old players who missed out on that opportunity last year, who are going to come in hungry this year. So I suppose the one question moving forward is going to be what happens in goal. There's going to be an unknown netminder who hasn't been in this situation before. any one of the five it could be, and they haven't been in this situation before. So that's going to be the interesting part here. But I think when I look at the depth of their group up front, really impressive. Byron might be the best player going into this thing in the tournament. So, I like their chances from a personnel perspective. You have to get the goaltending thing kind of straightened away, get your starter figured out, and move from there. But no doubt this is a really good team, Scott.
December 13th is the day to mark on your calendar. That's when Team Canada has to enter the bubble in Edmonton. The magic number Hockey Canada has to get down to by then is 40. Now that's players and staff, with the assumption being 25 players and 15 staff members. Sam, thanks for doing this, and we'll talk again after they make some cuts.
All right. Sounds good, Scott. Thanks.